Hey everyone, welcome back to On the Grid, and in today's video I want to take a walk through photo mode. Photography has been a part of my career direct or indirectly for many years, and once I got into racing games I started to see some really great shots coming out from the likes of Forza and GT. So today I want to share a look at what photo mode is from a photography perspective. Many of the sims use a really good integrated system to get nice action shots or spotlighting various cars and tracks, as we see here where in Formula 1 2020, it's just got that beautiful blurred background, that nice bokeh, so the focus is really on the subject. Some games like AC can use additional third-party add-ons to allow for a more creative freedom. I'm going to use F1 2020 and AMS2 to walk through what all these settings do. Photo mode, much like replays, can be a game within a game, as we've seen with the likes of Forza photo competitions. So the first thing I'll do is I usually go in and set up a race with what I'd like to capture. So I've set up a race here with the classic MP4 1988 Senna car at Monaco because it's probably one of my favorite races to go back and watch. When racing, what's really important, rather than approach it as a race, especially when you're doing photo or replays, is to try and create some really cool potential content for the replay or for the photo. Examples would be doing things like side-by-sides, doing overtakes, going close to a wall. Really, it's just trying to plan out what would look good in a photo or for video footage. Then what's important, as we did here, load up the replay, scan through until you get to the scene you want, and from there, let's load up photo mode for an explanation of the settings. So what I'm going to do first is get to where I want to capture some action. Okay, so let's get up about here where we're coming through the chicane near the swimming pool. I like the shot because it comes over that curb, but I just like because you see the cars in the background and you also see the, my car or the Senna car. First thing we're going to do is we're going to zoom right up. I'm going to get down nice and low. Let's just get down a little bit high. We don't want to isolate that car in the background too much. So it's going to render where we are here now. You're not seeing any difference because even if I have, for example, the depth of field mode on manual, that's what I want to do because I want to have full control of what's going on. Focus distance is fine. We don't really need that because that's just me manually moving back and forth. So now here's where the key thing is. So I have the f-stop set at 2.2. You can go lower to say 1.4 and it's going to render. Nothing is happening right now. And the reason is because my shutter speed is at 1/2000th of a second. Now, when you're seeing action shots in sports, whether it be any kind of sports where there's a lot of movement or fast movement, a lot of times photographers will use high shutter speed to capture the action like still so you can see everything sharp. But when they want to show emotion or movement or give you to feel the actual speed, you need to lower your shutter speed. Now, I would suggest starting somewhere, going by the way, I would suggest starting somewhere around 1/250 and you'll see this will render and it'll start to isolate the background. So you'll see the track on the right hand side. It's going a little bit more blurry. The crowd in the grandstand is a little bit more blurry because we're getting down to speed because these cars are moving quite quickly. We're starting to give it a little bit of movement to the actual action. So when we talk about f-stop or aperture in some games as it will be titled, really what that means is that it's allowing more light into your lens. So the lower the number, like a 1.4 or a 1.2, it allows more light into your lens. So it's better for low light photos, but it's also better for isolating your subject and getting a really nice blurred background or a bokeh. Now, when we go back to the days before portrait mode and stuff were in the phones, when you take a picture with your phone, everything was sharp. So the perceived idea was that, oh, this is a great picture. One of the things that sets a good photo from a great photo apart is the ability to capture the subject and making it the focal point of your story. So let's just work with this shot here. And I'm going to go back down to say 1.4, for example. Let's go to 1.4 and we'll isolate that. We're getting a bit more blur, but I still need to slow down the action, or actually slow down the lens a bit more to give a bit more blur in there. And as you can see, this car is really in focus. And everything behind is starting to go blur and have that nice bokeh. What we want to do is we want to keep the motion blur camera attached to the car, because if it's not attached to the car, it's just going to be all over the place. So we want to make sure it's focused on this subject, and this is what I want to capture. Shutter speed, I would say in real life, when you're hand holding your camera, you don't want to really go any lower than 125, 180, because at 160, that's really when the hand can start to shake and you get blur in your lens or you get blur in your photo. So 125 is really good for hand holding, but in a game, we don't have to worry about that because it's fixed. So the lower the shutter speed, the more movement you're going to have in your shot. So especially for something like an action sport or an action shot, having a little bit of movement really gives you that perspective of speed. The really key important thing is when we talk about subject, we have this thing called the rule of thirds. Now, the rule of thirds is, you see this shot is pretty much in the center of my screen. Now, it's a bit boring when you have it like that. So what we want to do is we're going to go over to grid lines. We're going to add the grid lines, and the rule of thirds is you don't want your subject in the middle. That's when it's boring. You want to try and tell a story with it. So what we want to do is we're going to just move this a little bit over, say just off the center, or we'll try the other way. Try and go this way a little bit more. Move it to that angle. But when we move it to that angle, we're losing the shots in the background. So let's move it through here, just slightly off center, and we'll go just down a little bit. Not too much, just up a little bit there. Perfect. Let it render. There. So that just gives it a bit more interest to the shot. Okay, so next thing we want to do is we're going to look at the bokeh. Now, some games will give you a lot more control over the bokeh type, but some games don't. Like in this example, you don't see control over the bokeh. We're just going through the presets here. Basically, you have your free camera, which is drone mode, exposure, depth of field mode, focus distance, f-stop, zoom, and shutter speed. Now, when we move over to the color grades or the effects, I tend to try and avoid using filters as much as possible, since it really generalizes the photo, and you'll see, I'll show you a couple examples, but I like to work on the image after in, say, Photoshop to really boost contrast, to color correct it, to make it look good. But let's try a couple things here. But you can see it just makes everything look the same. And when I'm working in like a post, or when I'm trying in a Photoshopper, for example, I'll kind of focus just on the car and just make the car stand out a little bit more. So I tend to leave this off, but if you don't want to deal with that, then just these how you like and pick the filter that you feel, sets the mood for what you want. Now, as far as overlays, we can turn these grid lines off now, because now we place the photo. We can go in here and we can start adding a vignette. That's a bit extreme, so let's narrow that vignette right to the outside, but that's pretty sharp vignette because you can see the corners are really dark. So let's try just narrow that down to quite low, just so it's very, very light. So this is rendered in. Now let's just turn it off, and you can see that just gives it a bit more mood. It's really fun. But like I said, you can really have a lot of fun with photo mode. I mean, you can capture some really great shots. If you remember a point in the race where somebody went off a track, it almost came back on the track and almost hit you, I would literally go back and take a shot of that. I mean, there's some really great things you can do with photo mode. So that's in F1 2020. I'll just actually save this shot. So let's get rid of this and take a look at it. I think that looks pretty decent. I can do quite a few things with that in the end. Let's take that shot. That's saved, so I know where I can go get it, and I'm going to remove that and put it into my computer so I can do some post work, and I'll post what it'll look like after. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to Automobilista 2, and we'll see what photo mode looks like there. Okay, so here we are in Automobilista 2, and I've done pretty much the same kind of layout on Monaco, but with a different car. I've taken the Rocco 01. So what we'll do is we're just going to let this play out, and we'll find in a spot where, it looks interesting to capture a shot, and we'll see what photo mode looks like in this. Actually, that's pretty cool there. So let's rewind a little bit. Let's actually bring that up a little bit closer. I like when it's coming down there. That could be just a good action shot from there. So what we'll do is we'll just go over to photo mode now. So drone camera, we can kind of move around. So if we want to just, flip around and just see what the action is like. But what's really cool actually with this one is if we just go to, for example, here, trackside camera, that's kind of the shot that I liked as it was going. So what we can do is we can zoom in a bit through there. So go that way. Let's take the focal length. Yeah, focal length's in about there. And focal distance good. Let's get the aperture down a bit more. We'll focus right on that car. And get the shutter speed up a little bit more. And I think I might need to use my mouse because it just seems to be clunky a little bit. Let's go up to there. We'll go to 1:125. We'll see how that looks. Okay, so that's good there. We'll bring the tracking speed up. It's just basically the tracking speed is just how quickly it's actually going into focus. So as I switch from there to there. Okay, so really with Automobilista 2, you can see the difference between Formula 1 2020 and Automobilista 2 is there's really no filters or anything here. It's just take the photo, but you have your controls, which is pretty much similar in all the games. Your camera mode, your aperture mode on isolating the subject or putting everything in focus, your focal length, how close or far you want to go, focus distance, and how deep you want that focus to go in, and your bokeh shape, which creates that blur. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take these two photos and I'm going to go in and work on them, and I'll just show you what they look like in a second. All right, so here we are looking at the original photo for Automobilista 2. As you can see, I tried to get as best of a shot I can out of it. Now I'm going to switch over and show you what the final version looks like. And I really didn't spend very much time on it, but you can see I just brought out a little bit more contrast, a bit more drama to it, punched up the colors a little bit. And I think I spent maybe 10-15 minutes on it. I didn't really want to go too much time because I could easily spend a couple of hours with no problem. And we'll switch over here now. I'll show you this was the original one for Formula 1 2020. And here is the final version. So it created a little bit more kind of contrast, a little bit more punchiness to it, create that little bit more vibrance. But I also did something just a little bit more vintage. So I'll show you here. We'll switch it over to the vintage look. This kind of goes back to a bit more of the 80s, give you that feel of what it was like back then, desaturation, kind of like that television feel to it. So yeah, so these are, and you can see if I go back to the original Formula 1 2020, all the colors that are around the outside are still desaturated, but I did punch up the color on the car a little bit more. And that's what I mean by using filters as opposed to, going in something in a photo editor where you can control what you want to really bring out and what you want to focus on. I really hope you guys enjoyed this quick insight into photo mode and its features and what each of those things do. As always, I appreciate you guys watching the video. Please subscribe and hit the like button down below. We'll catch you guys again really soon. Take care.